Okay then. Well, everyone, today is August 6th, 2020. This is a special meeting of the members of the State Liquor Authority being held in Albany and also remotely. We have Chairman Bradley participating by telephone. Chairman Bradley?
I'm here.
Okay. We also have Commissioner Ford, who can be seen on the video, Commissioner Fan, who can be seen on the video, General Counsel Meyerhoff on the video, Deputy Commissioner of Licensing Roberts, who's with us by phone. Commissioner Adam, you there?
Here.
Okay, thank you. And myself, Secretary Johnny, who's here in person in the Albany office. We have 8 items on today's calendar. They are all requests from Counsel's Office for emergency summary orders of suspension. The first item I have is 929LL, serial number Kings OP 1261994. Licensee is ENBA LLC.
Yeah, hi, good afternoon, Chairman Bradley, Commissioners Fan and Ford, Senior Attorney Caramello here on behalf of Counsel's Office in this request for summary order suspension for ENBA LLC, DBA Ponte Vecchio Restaurant, case number 146415. Original issue date on the license is June 13, 2012. Last night, August 5th, 2020 at 7:45 p.m., investigator Robert Eicher observed 3 tables of patrons seated inside the interior of the licensed premises consuming food and alcoholic beverages. The tables at issue were placed adjacent to a temporary outdoor structure that had been constructed to enable proper outdoor dining during the reopening, but were actually inside of the licensed premises proper. Investigator Eicher also observed a large group of patrons being led through the restaurant to a backyard outdoor seating area, of which approximately 10 patrons were not wearing face masks while traversing through the restaurant. Investigator Eicher also observed several other patrons get up and leave their tables during the course of their meals without wearing face masks. Licensee is being charged with violating Executive Order 202.3 and 202.38, as well as failure to supervise for this series of violations. The need for licensees in New York City to prevent on-premises consumption by patrons during the reopening while undertaking responsible outdoor service of food and alcoholic beverages is central to the governor's executive orders in the name of public health and safety, and has been widely reported via media sources. At no point during the reopening has on-premises consumption of food or beverages been permitted in New York City proper. As a result, it's the position of the Office of Counsel. It's not reasonable to believe that a licensed retailer in New York City could be unaware of his responsibilities to prohibit on-premises consumption by patrons during these times. As a result, it is the position of the Office of Counsel that the licensee was fully aware of his responsibilities, but merely chose to circumvent the requirement to prevent on-premises dining by patrons in an effort to gain more customers at the expense of his more responsible competitors who have chosen to follow the rules. Due to the foregoing, the Office of Counsel hereby requests an immediate summary order of suspension be issued for this license. Thank you for your time.
Yes, thank you, Paul. It's Meyerhoff here. I just want to add that we are seeing this more and more, and it is going to continue to be a problem. Licensees who seem to be able to serve people outside properly are just going to continue to have a number of tables set up inside close to the window in obvious violation of the law until they get caught. They're rolling the dice, and they're rolling the dice with the health and welfare of citizens they're not entitled to roll the dice with. Just wanted to add that. It's another one of those cases.
Okay then, Commissioner Fan, do you have any questions?
No, I have no questions. Thank you, Paul and Gary.
Commissioner Ford, do you have any questions?
Could you explain those photos a little bit better to me? I mean, it looked like they were under a tent and seated, but you say they actually were inside?
Yes, Commissioner. If you look closely, there's actually tables beyond what you can see that appears to be a tent, a canvas covering. There's tables behind those tables. It's those tables that we're talking about. They're actually inside the proper licensed premises. Those are glass doors, essentially a glass partition wall, which separates the interior of the proper licensed premises from the sidewalk. It's a sidewalk that has that canvas covering over it. So
So they were
there's actually pictures of the interior of this licensed premises on our systems on CNG that I viewed earlier today. And
Okay.
it's clearly a glass partition wall that these folks are sitting on the other side of.
all right. So they were bringing the outside in other words.
Correct, sir.
I'm good. I don't have any more questions. Thank you.
All right. Chairman Bradley, you have any questions?
I have no questions.
All right, then I'll call for the vote of the members. Commissioner Fan. Commissioner Fan, you're muted.
This licensee has committed violations of the governor's executive order, most importantly, by continuing indoor service. Indoor service has been illegal in New York City since March 16, and it was well publicized that indoor service was not allowed when the 5 boroughs got into phase 4 on July 17. I agree with council that this licensee cannot be unaware that they're not allowed to serve inside, but continue to choose profit over safety of its employees and customers. We see this because they are continuing to allow large groups of patrons with no face masks walking through their restaurant to get to an outside area. It's long been announced that face masks are required by both employees and patrons inside of any businesses at this point. And so this licensee is clearly disregarding this authority and the governor's standing executive orders. And due to immediate threat to public health, safety, and welfare, I'm voting to summarily suspend this license.
Okay, Commissioner Ford.
As Commissioner Fan has stated, clear violation of the executive orders regarding indoor consumption with 10 to 12 patrons inside. Patrons also standing and consuming and not complying with the rules of social distancing currently in place. And also patrons not wearing masks properly as well. So I vote to summarily suspend as well.
And Chairman Bradley.
I vote to summarily suspend. Just to reiterate what Commissioner Fan said, the indoor dining has been illegal since March 16th. It has been not only publicized then, but it continues to be widely publicized now. So there's no way that any restaurateur would not be aware that they're not allowed to have tables inside their restaurant. This is obviously a danger to the public health. I vote to summarily suspend.
Okay, then the next item I have, 929MM, Queens OP 1039978. The licensee is the End Zone Inc.
Good afternoon, Chairman Bradley, Commissioner Fan, and Commissioner Ford. William Brennan for Council's Office. I'm here today to request that the board summarily suspend the licensee for blatantly violating Executive Order 202.3 along with the associated SLA guidelines, Executive Order 202.16 along with the associated SLA guidelines, and Section 9 NYCRR 48.2 of the Rules of the Authority. The End Zone Inc. has been licensed since July of 1988 as a tavern serving beer, wine, and liquor. The premises is located at 14944 14th Avenue, Whitestone, New York. On August 5th, 2020, investigator Robert Bubnik of the EO Task Force performed an inspection of the licensed premises. Investigator Bubnik observed at least 6 patrons inside the licensed premises consuming beverages at the bar in violation of EO 202.3 and SLA guidelines. Investigator Bubnik also observed that the bartender who was behind the bar was not wearing a face mask as required by EO 202.16 and the SLA and DOH guidelines. The report includes a picture of the patrons at the bar, some with beer bottles visible in front of them. The picture also includes the bartender standing behind the bar with no face covering at all. The investigator spoke with the bartender, identified as Rebecca Adorno, and informed her that no patrons were permitted to be served inside the premises and that all employees must wear a face mask while at the licensed premises. Ms. Adorno then directed the patrons to become seated outside. The licensee has shown a blatant disregard for the governor's executive order and the SLA guidance. In doing so, the licensee put not only their patrons and employees at risk, but put the health and safety of the community and general public at risk during this terrible pandemic. The licensee has put their own profit over the safety and welfare of the general public. For these reasons, we respectfully request that the board issue an emergency order suspending the licensee in order to protect the safety and welfare of the general public. Thank you.
All right then, Commissioner Fan, do you have any questions?
Council Brennan, when they saw this drinking at the bar, was there any food?
That was not in the report, and I just received the investigative report this morning, and I put a call into the investigator, so I can't confirm that. If indeed it shows there was no food, the NOP will reflect that charge as well.
All right, Commissioner Ford.
Commissioner Fan asked the question that I was going to ask, so I don't have any other questions. Thank you.
Chairman Bradley.
I have no questions.
All right, then I'll call for your votes. Commissioner Fan.
This licensee has violated the governor's executive order surrounding the COVID pandemic by allowing indoor service. Multiple patrons were found at the establishment and drinking at the bar. Many of the employees, even though they've been required since April 12th to do so, are not wearing face masks as they continue to serve customers. This licensee has a long history has been around since 1988. Fortunate that during this difficult time, they've chosen to violate the governor's executive orders. And due to imminent threat to public health, safety, and welfare, I'm voting to summarily suspend this license.
Commissioner Ford, your vote.
I'm voting to summarily suspend for the same reasons. Indoor consumption has been not been allowed since the very beginning of this. So there's clearly no excuse for it. I vote to summarily suspend.
And Chairman Bradley.
I vote to summarily suspend on the same grounds as Commissioner Fan.
All right, thank you. The next item I have, 929NN. It's Richmond OP 1305468. Licensing is Marie's 2 Corp.
Good morning, members. This matter is being brought before you today for consideration of an emergency summary order of suspension pursuant to Section 401 Sub 3 of the State Administrative Procedure Act. This premises was licensed in November of 2017 as a restaurant and is located in an area zoned as mixed use on Staten Island. This case was initiated by a visit to the premises conducted last night on August 5th of 2020. On that date, 2 task force investigators observed at least 9 patrons of the licensed premises lingering and congregating on the sidewalk area directly in front of the premises. These customers were observed standing, drinking, and not wearing masks. Photographs of the patrons in question were taken and are included as part of the exhibits. A further observation was made of 2 employees without masks. One of these was identified as the licensed principal, Gina Morrison. She's listed in the authorities' records as a stockholder. The investigators interviewed Morrison, who insisted that she was not required to wear a mask and would not wear a mask, and that she had the right to decide to wear a mask or not in her own business. While she was being interviewed, 4 patrons came into the establishment in order to get refills of alcoholic beverages from the bar. The fact that this licensee insists that she does not have to wear a mask because it is her business suggests that she is not willing to comply and does not respect the executive orders or guidance on being permitted to serve during this pandemic. This is further evidenced by the photos and observations of the investigators of the stand-up outside bar service that she's essentially operating. This licensee is being charged with the following executive order violations of the ABC law and rules: 202.38, 202.43, 202.16, and failure to exercise adequate supervision. These executive orders were put into place with the purpose of protecting the public health, welfare, and safety imminently at risk in the midst of a deadly pandemic, and to prevent people from congregating in and around licensed establishments in the manner indicated here. Given the words and actions of the license principal, the members can have no faith that this licensee will adhere to the executive order moving forward, or any executive order. It's submitted that emergency summary suspension is warranted to ensure the health, welfare, and safety of the members of the public.
Thank you, Jamie. Gary here. Just wanted to add one thing. There is a reference in the report to at one point this licensee saying that she suffers from asthma and that's why she wasn't wearing her mask. So what we really have is a record of an owner who can't decide whether to offer a lame excuse or stand her ground politically on whether or not she really has to follow the governor's executive orders. And couldn't make up her mind which one to do. Whether she has asthma or not is not relevant at this point. Her willingness to concede her views of the governor's executive orders and her requirement or lack thereof to follow them disqualify her from being able to operate a restaurant in this pandemic under these restrictions. Thank you.
Okay, then Commissioner Fan, do you have any questions?
No, I do not have any questions.
Thank you. Commissioner Ford, do you have any questions?
No, I don't have any questions, Tom. Thank you.
And Chairman Bradley.
I have no questions, thanks.
All right, with that, then I'll call for your votes. First, Commissioner Fan.
This licensee has definitely committed multiple violations of the governor's executive orders designed to prevent the spread of COVID-19. I agree with Council Meyerhoff that if the business owner either has a political reason or has a health condition that does not allow her to wear a mask, then she needs to perhaps not be at the established business, because face coverings has been required at all businesses in the state of New York since April 12. The requirements for all business owners to be, all restaurant owners to be responsible for 100 feet in front of their establishments and requiring social distancing among the patrons and stopping open containers has been in effect since June 18. And so this licensee, again, really has no reason to say she doesn't know about it or that she's not enforcing it. And so this licensee is clearly disregarding this authority and all of the governor's executive orders surrounding the COVID pandemic. She's choosing her own profit over the safety of her employees and her patrons, and due to immediate threat to public health, safety, and welfare, I'm voting to summarily suspend this license.
Commissioner Ford, your vote.
With crowds congregating on the street and the sidewalks in proximity to the premises, the employees and the owner not wearing face masks properly, if at all, and patrons standing, consuming, ignoring social distancing guidelines, I vote to summarily suspend this license.
And Chairman Bradley.
I vote to summarily suspend the license as well. Whether she doesn't believe in wearing a mask or has an ailment, I don't think, based on the other evidence in this case, is even relevant, given the fact that she wasn't enforcing it on her own employees or her customers. She was allowing congregation, and then the customers were coming in and getting drinks at the bar, take them back outside and drink them. I think it's obvious that this is a risk to the public safety, and I vote to summarily suspend.
All right, thank you. The next item I have, 92900. King's OP 1272114. Licensee is Berry Street Associates, LLC.
Good afternoon. William Brennan again for Council's Office. I'm here today to request that the board summarily suspend the licensee for blatantly violating Executive Order 202.3 along with the associated SLA guidance, as well as violating Section 9 NYCRR 48.2 of the Rules of the Authority. Berry Street Associates, DBA Gran Torino, has been licensed since April of 2015 as a restaurant serving beer, wine, and liquor. The premises is located at 131 Berry Street, Brooklyn, New York. On August 4th, 2020, investigator Adele Ibrahim and Rosemary Donahue of the EO Task Force performed an inspection of the licensed premises. The investigators observed at least 3 tables, each containing at least 2 patrons inside the licensed premises, consuming beverages and/or food in violation of EO 202.3 and the SLA guidelines. The report includes several pictures of patrons seated at tables clearly inside the licensed premises. The investigator spoke with an employee named George Louise, who identified himself as the manager. Mr. Louise told investigators that he thought dining in this area was permitted and pointed to 2 open windows. The investigators noted that the solarium-like structure was permanent in nature, with a hard permanent roof and solid or glass sidewalls and windows. The area is essentially weather-tight, except when the windows are open. I reviewed the licensee's file and workflow and found that in the licensee's application diagram, the licensee had labeled this area as, quote, fully enclosed seating, unquote, as opposed to, quote, covered outdoor seating that is labeled depicting outside areas on the ground floor of the premises in the diagram associated with the application. The authority has also received numerous complaints about this licensee, alleging various social distancing violations. The most recent complaint was on July 24th, with 4 other complaints coming shortly before the 24th. The licensee has shown a blatant disregard for the governor's executive orders and the SLA and DOH guidance. In doing so, the licensee put not only their patrons and employees at risk, but put the health and safety of the community and general public at risk during this terrible pandemic. The licensee has put their own profit over the safety and welfare of the general public. For these reasons, we respectfully request that the board issue an emergency order suspending the licensee in order to protect the safety and welfare of the general public. Thank you.
Okay, then, Commissioner Fan, do you have any questions?
Council Brennan, can you expand a little bit on the prior complaints that you mentioned?
There were various complaints coming from citizens of the neighborhood alleging anything from allowing folks to congregate in front of the premises to allowing people to walk in without masks, etc. They were very recent, and this was the first investigation that occurred since those complaints came in. So I'm only giving them to you to show that this is not apparently a one-off. These complaints were consistent with what was seen by the investigators.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Ford, do you have any questions?
So I'm trying to understand this outdoor extension. So is this an area that's on their licensed premises, but just not allowed to be used for now at this time?
No, I'm sorry, Commissioner. No, Commissioner. It's part of the licensed premises. When they submitted their diagram to license, they submitted the area that was bordered by the front sidewalk. And so there's an area for outdoor consumption within what they get outside of the structure. This solarium is attached to the structure, and you enter ingress and egress is through the inside of the structure. When I looked at the pictures of the original application, that area was intact, had seats and tables with it, even though there was snow outside. So it's not the sidewalk, it's not part of the sidewalk. And by their own labeling of it as fully enclosed seating, they've admitted that it's part of the structure. Now, there may be a little confusion on the part of the licensee, but they submitted the diagram, that labeling this as part of the enclosed area. So I don't think any confusion would be a legitimate argument.
Yeah, I would just say that the confusion may have been on the part of the manager. And if that is the case, and that was for real, that's not anybody's responsibility other than the licensee to make sure that his employees know that they can't serve inside. And this is definitely inside. There's no argument that it's not inside, frankly.
Yes, Gary, and that's why the charge for failure to supervise, because he self-identified as a manager, but the onus is on the actual principals to ensure that they follow the ABC law as well as the EOs. And in this case, the principal submitted this as part of the inside of the premises.
Okay. Thank you.
And then Chairman Bradley, do you have any questions?
I have no questions.
Okay, then I'll call for your votes. Commissioner Fan,
This licensee has committed a violation of the governor's executive orders designed to prevent the spread of COVID-19 in New York by allowing indoor service in an area that is a part of the structure and should be known as being indoors by all the employees and also the licensee. This licensee have also had many complaints regarding other EO violations, and so overall, this licensee is disregarding this authority and all the governor's efforts to try to stop the spread of COVID-19. And due to immediate threat to public health, safety, and welfare, I'm voting to summarily suspend this license.
okay, Commissioner Ford, your vote.
They were allowing indoor consumption in an enclosed porch that in their own SLA application, they labeled as indoors. So I think we can all agree that they knew that it was considered indoors. They were trying to split hairs here, but it didn't work. So I vote to summarily suspend.
Chairman Bradley,
I vote to summarily suspend indoor dining illegal, and if you are allowing indoor dining in the city of New York, you will be closed.
all right, thank you then. Our next item is 929PP, Bronx OP 1313176. The licensee is Eagle and Cedar Group LLC.
Hi, good afternoon, members.
Before we get going, I have to recuse myself from this case because I was at the location when the observations were made.
All right, thank you. Go ahead, Kayla.
So good afternoon, members. This is Kayla O'Donnell on behalf of Council's Office. Council's Office is seeking an emergency summary order suspension for licensee Eagle and Cedar Group LLC, doing business as Phoenix Bar and Restaurant, as this licensee has violated several executive orders in addition to the ABCL and the New York City Fire Code. The license was issued on February 27, 2019 to operate a restaurant in Bronx, New York. The premises is no longer operating as a restaurant, as the photos and the report and the record before you make it clear that the licensee has begun operating as an outside hookah lounge and bar scene without approval from the SLA to change its method of operation. On July 31st, 2020, SLA investigator Cervali visited the licensed premises along with Chairman Bradley and found that DOT authorized sidewalk eating area completely empty. However, extremely loud music could be heard emanating from the premises from a half block away. The investigator found that in an unlicensed area in the rear of the premises, the licensee had essentially converted a parking lot into a nightclub with tables and chairs, but also couches and a DJ station. This area is not part of the licensed premises. To date, there has never been a diagram submitted indicating that this area would be used by the licensee. The tables were not situated 6 feet apart in this area. Investigator Cervali did not observe food on any of the tables in this area. However, there were drinks on the tables, including a tub of beer. There was also hookah on a lot of the tables, which patrons were smoking. Notably, this licensee does not have a hookah permit and was selling hookah that is illegal even with a permit. Some of the patrons were standing without wearing face coverings, talking to patrons while they smoked hookah. A total of 8 employees were found not to be wearing face coverings as required. One of the 8 employees was a manager. When investigator Cervali entered the premises, he observed employees running around handing out masks. There was not a New York forward reopening plan. There were no receipts for liquor or beer purchases. and there was not a security guard contract available on site for inspection. Investigators Trevally conducted an inspection of the premises and found uninspected fire extinguishers, unmounted fire extinguishers, an unsecured gas tank, and no flame-proofing certificate, all in violation of the fire code. This licensee is operating as a hookah lounge without alcohol and a live DJ, not as a sit-down restaurant serving food as the governor has required. The licensee's intentional violations of the executive orders issued in connection with the coronavirus health emergency alone warrant the summary suspension of this license. This licensee cannot be trusted to follow the law, even when human life depends on adherence to it. As such, continuing to allow the licensee to operate while the charges are litigated would endanger the health, welfare, and safety of the entire community that the licensed premises is located in, and in consideration of them, immediate action in the form of an emergency order of summary suspension is required. Thank you.
Okay, then, Commissioner Fan, do you have any questions?
No, I do not have any questions.
Commissioner Ford, do you have any questions?
No, I don't have any questions, Tom. Thank you.
Chairman Bradley, what about you?
Oh,
I'm
he
sorry,
doesn't
you
count.
recuse yourself. Never mind, yes.
He doesn't
That's why
count.
he has no, that's why he has no questions. All right, then I'll call for your votes. Commissioner Fan,
This licensee has been really outrageously committing multiple violations of the governor's executive order and many ABCL laws. They have allowed essentially a nightclub to exist in a rear parking lot that is not part of the licensed premise. The owner is out of town. He's not even supervising his establishment. There are lots of fire safety issues. There's no food. There's a DJ who's not allowed, and no social distancing, no face mask being used by any of the employees, including security guard. This location is clearly a waste of valuable investigative resources, and the licensee is disregarding this authority, our laws, our ABC laws, and also the governor's executive order. And due to immediate threat to public health, safety, and welfare, I'm voting to summarily suspend this license.
thank you. Commissioner Ford,
Several employees noted as not wearing face mask coverings, including security guards, patrons standing, consuming, ignoring social distancing guidelines. The music was so loud it was blaring outside that we heard a half a block away. The authorized area in the front was set up, but wasn't being used because the large rear parking lot was being used instead, which is not an authorized area of the licensed premises, with improperly distanced tables and chairs and a live DJ creating a nightclub atmosphere. As counsel said, hookah was being sold and smoked, but no hookah license, and smoking is also prohibited in a restaurant setting. Not that this place was operating as such. No food observed other than some raw chicken being prepared in the kitchen. No New York Ford reopening plan, no books and records, failed to permit inspection. Fire extinguisher improperly mounted, another fire extinguisher obstructed by a compressed gas tank, which wasn't secured, other fire extinguishers not mounted at all, discharged or inspected. Curtain hung over an exit door, and no flame proofing certificate. So for all these reasons, and plus everything that Commissioner Fan has said, which I probably repeated a good deal of, I vote to summarily suspend.
all right, thank you. The next item I have is 929QQ, Queens OP 1291945, Expostiva Inc.
Good afternoon again, members. This matter is being brought before you today for consideration of an emergency summary order of suspension pursuant to Section 401, Subdivision 3 of the State Administrative Procedure Act. This premises was licensed in April of 2016 as a bar tavern serving beer, wine, and liquor, and is located in an area zoned as mixed use in Whitestone, Queens, New York. This case was initiated by a visit to the premises conducted on August 5th of 2020. On that date, two task force investigators observed that the premises initially appeared to be closed. The lights at the front entrance were turned off. The front door was locked. There was a sign stating to call a number for food orders, partially obscuring the window. But then An employee was observed removing a trash bag full of empty bottles from the front door, and he was questioned by the investigators, who then gained access to the premises. Inside, there were 4 patrons seated at the bar drinking various beverages. No food was observed on the bar where the customers were seated. The workers stated that the customers were waiting for food. However, after the investigators entered, the customers quickly consumed their various drinks and left without taking any food with them. The employee that the investigators encountered was not wearing a face mask. The licensee is being charged with violation of Executive Order 202.3 for allowing indoor service, a violation of Executive Order 202.16 for employees without face masks, and failure to exercise adequate supervision. These executive orders were put into place with the purpose of protecting the public health, welfare, and safety imminently at risk in the midst of a deadly viral pandemic, and to prevent people from congregating in licensed establishments in such a way that viral transmission would be more likely. This executive order regarding indoor service is widely publicized and has been in effect since March 16th of this year. The licensee is operating an illegal indoor bar tavern service. The licensee has now been caught, despite the licensee's extensive efforts at concealment, that they were pretending to be closed so that they could deliberately violate multiple executive orders is direct evidence that they knew and consciously disregarded the law. And also that the members can have no faith that the licensee will adhere to the executive orders moving forward. It is requested that emergency summary suspension is completed to ensure the health, welfare, and safety of the members of the public.
Okay, Commissioner Fan, do you have any questions?
No, I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Commissioner Ford?
No, I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Chairman Bradley?
No questions.
All right, then I'll ask for your votes. First, Commissioner Fan.
This licensee has committed violation of the governor's executive order designed to prevent the spread of COVID-19 by allowing indoor service and allowing employees to serve customers with no mask, allowing patrons to drink inside of the establishment with no masks on. They're also allowing alcohol service with no food, no accompanying food. This licensee is showing a blatant disregard for the authority and also the governor's executive orders. They've also actually blatantly tried to conceal the fact that they are open. This location is clearly a valuable investigative resource as they continue to disguise what they're doing, which is against the law. And due to immediate threat to public health, safety, and welfare, I'm voting to summarily suspend this license.
Thank you. Commissioner Ford, your vote.
They were obviously trying to conceal the fact that they were breaking the law and serving inside. No food was observed, and those that were allegedly waiting for food all left when the investigators arrived. But there was a sign, at least, with a phone number to call for food orders. Employees not wearing face masks either. So for all those reasons and everything that Commissioner Fan has stated, I vote to summarily suspend.
Chairman Bradley.
I vote to summarily suspend on all the same grounds as the other 2 committees.
Okay, then the next item I have is 929RR. It's Erie OP 316-0810. Licensee is Arrowhead Timber Lodge, LLC.
Good afternoon again, members. Jamie Gallagher appearing on behalf of the authority. This premises is an OP licensee that also hosts weddings on Friday and Saturdays, as well as having a restaurant operation the other days of the week. The reason we're here today is because this premises is allowing private wedding parties larger than 50 people. Before I get into the facts of the investigator's visit, it's important to note here, and so that we're very clear on the record. On July 14th of 2020 and on July 16th of 2020, Beverage control investigator Daniel Nevins had telephone conversations with this licensee and advised him that the executive orders and guidance only permitted 50 people at a private event. The licensee stated that he believes he can have more people than that at a private event because half of his capacity is greater than 50. Investigator Nevins advised him on both occasions that he was incorrect and advised him of the guidance and where it could be located on our website. On August 1st of 2020, Investigator Nevins visited the premises and he observed the following. A sign at the entry to the wedding that he initially observed showed a seating chart with 25 tables with 6 guests listed at each table, which would make a total of 150 listed guests for the event. He observed at least 4 people inside the premises standing without face masks in a group. Investigator Nevins observed approximately 100 plus guests present at the venue, both inside and out. He did not want to get too close to the wedding party, but he was able to take some photographs from a distance, which are included in the information before the board. The wedding party was walking around in the patio area with drinks in hand, unmasked, dancing while being announced to guests, not social distancing. And the wedding party was a large party of more than 10 people. He estimated approximately 20 in the wedding party. There was also a second wedding being held in a separate building on the premises property. Investigator Nevins was not able to count the number of guests at that wedding, but he did observe at least 50 cars in the parking spaces reserved for attendees of the second event. The rules and guidance regarding, upstate anyway, regarding private gatherings differ from the rules of a normal restaurant operation. Restaurant operation allows for 50% capacity in phase 4 upstate. Private gatherings like weddings are limited to 50 people in phase 4, not 50% of capacity. This is in part because in a normal restaurant operation, the guests do not mingle and interact as they would at a private event like a wedding. So in a true restaurant mode, patrons dine in their small separate groups at tables spaced 6 feet apart. Things are done properly. And rarely, if ever, stand, mingle, and interact with the other diners. A private event where mingling and congregating are more likely increases the risk of spread as the patrons more actively engage with each other. Thus, the rules are different. This licensee is not doing anyone any favors by allowing this. He's only favoring his bottom line at the expense of the health and safety of his guests and the public. One infected person at one of these events has the potential here to spread the virus to an entire family and generations of that family, resulting in a possibly devastating ending to what should be a happy time. Let the record be clear that this licensee was twice advised that he was in violation of the executive orders, New York Forward, and associated posted New York State Liquor Authority and Department of Health guidance. That the licensee still chose to go forward in this manner is direct evidence that the members can unfortunately not rely on him to follow any guidance moving forward. The licensee was not limiting capacity as required, not enforcing social distancing, allowing guests and the wedding party to stand and congregate while drinking and dancing without masks. The only protocol in place to enforce the rules for the guests was taking temperatures at the door, and once inside, the behavior of the guests was left unchecked. These executive orders and associated guidance were put into place with the purpose of protecting the public health, welfare, and safety imminently at risk in the midst of a deadly viral pandemic, and to prevent people from congregating in and around licensed establishments in such a way that viral transmission would be more likely. Given the facts here, the members can have no faith that the licensee will adhere to the executive orders moving forward. And it is recommended that an emergency summary order of suspension be issued for this establishment.
Thank you, Jamie. Gary Meyerhoff, I want to add a couple points. One thing that Jamie didn't mention is there's another reason why events have a 50-person limit and restaurants don't, and that's arrival and departure time. When you schedule an event like a wedding, everybody shows up at the same time, and lots of people get seated at the same time, and lots of people leave at the same time. Way bigger opportunities for mingling and congregating, the very thing that all of these executive orders are designed to prevent. We have a lot of wedding venues, catering venues in New York State, and we have not seen violations like this frequently, maybe a few. The licensees that we warn get the message and they cooperate, and they limit they either close or they limit their events to 50 people. This licensee claimed that they were entitled to set their own restrictions and plan to make sure that the virus wouldn't spread and that they would take people's temperatures and that that was good enough. The governor and the New York Department of Health and the experts they rely on are well aware of the other options that New York State has for dealing with large events. They could do exactly what these owners decided they wanted to do. They could do what other states are doing, and we've seen what happened in other states. Their decision at this point to protect the public is 50 or less. That's it. There were probably 150 guests in one venue. 50 cars was probably over 50 in the other one. No expectation that they would not have more weddings this weekend. And while it is undoubtedly a hardship that people who want to get married at this point have to have small weddings or adjourn their weddings, this is an unprecedented time for our country and for our state, and people just have to be patient and wait and protect each other. So that's why we brought this case to you today. Thank you.
All right, Commissioner Fan, do you have any questions?
No, I do not have any questions.
Commissioner Ford, do you have any questions?
Will this cancel his license for the restaurant too, if we vote to suspend today?
Yes. And it will cancel the OP and the ad bar.
Thank you, Counselor.
And on that point, Commissioner Ford, we have no confidence that this licensee would enforce the rules relating to restaurant service either. They made it clear that they were on their own agenda. And while we don't necessarily have evidence of those violations, we know that they're violating with respect to this in a very serious way.
Thank you.
All right, Chairman Bradley, do you have any questions?
No questions.
All right, then I'm going to turn to the vote. Commissioner Fan.
This licensee has been told at least twice by our SLA investigator that private gatherings of more than 50 people are not allowed under any circumstance. The licensee is blatantly disregarding the advice that was given to him and continue to allow weddings to happen at its location. I counted myself the invitation, the seating chart of one of the weddings. It's definitely it's at least 146 people. They've allowed patrons to roam around with no social distancing, no masks, and open containers. I agree with Counsel Gallagher and Meyerhoff that this licensee cannot be trusted, and this venue is a waste of valuable investigative resource, and I vote to summarily suspend this license.
All right, then Commissioner Ford.
In this day and age, the way things are right now, I don't know how anyone pretty much could have a wedding besides a small gathering of a immediate family of a few people. I'm sure there's other weddings that this licensee has booked, and it breaks my heart for them, but the onus is upon the licensee, not the SLA. So since he doesn't seem to want to adhere to the rules right now, like everyone else is that holds weddings across the state, I have to vote to summarily suspend.
All right, then Chairman Bradley, your vote.
I vote to summarily suspend as well. As both councils pointed out, the rules are in place for a clear reason. This individual was notified what the rules were. He decided that they did not apply to him and decided to risk his employees as well as his guests' health and the health of the public. So at this point, he should be summarily suspended because it's clear he's not going to follow or abide by any rules. So I vote to summarily suspend.
Okay, then our next item is 929SS. It's Nassau OP 1324000. The licensee is Hibiscus on the Mile, Inc.
Good afternoon, members of the board. Michael Amarato for the Office of Counsel. We submit the subject licensee, Hibiscus on the Mile, which is located at 23 Woodcliffe Avenue in Freeport, which is also known as the Nautical Mile. We submit this to members of the authority to consider an order of suspension of their retail OP license pursuant to section 401 subsection 3 of the State Administrative Act. First, I'd like to point out and emphasize that this licensee was issued his license, or their license, I should say, on June 8th of 2020. And it was issued to operate as a restaurant with recorded music, dancing, and security guards. The SLA has received information. Specifically, I've had extensive conversations with the Deputy Chief Michael Smith, Sergeant Joseph Chiner, and SLA Investigator Stravalli in connection with the matters that took place not only last night, but have been going on since the beginning. This place has become a focal point for police attention in a short period of time. But more specifically, last night on August 5th at approximately 6:30 p.m., the task force investigators observed several patrons at the outside bar with only drinks at the location. Upon entering the establishment, they asked to speak with the manager, and they were brought upstairs to the inside bar. On their way inside, they observed several patrons walking around the outside deck with drinks in their hand. They met with the manager, and they explained what they were concerned about and asked to see a bar bill for 5 women who were sitting at the corner of the outside bar. The manager said no problem and showed them a receipt for 2 Hendricks and a salad. When asked about the beer and the other drinks in front of the women, explained that they paid cash, so it wouldn't show up on the tab. The manager was told that they cannot have patrons standing and consuming drinks, that they must be sitting. That when they went back out to the inside bar to point out the patrons to the manager who was standing, they asked to see the bar tab of a gentleman at the bar. When confirmed, the manager confessed that he had added food to the receipt when asked to see the bar tab. He also admitted that the 5 women at the bar also did not have food. So while talking with the manager and getting his information, it was no more people had arrived and sat at the deck with just their drinks and no food. The manager was advised, again, that this was against the rules and food must be served with any alcoholic drinks. He was also advised that all patrons must be seated when consuming, and when they are standing, they must wear a mask. During the course of this conversation, the investigator also noticed the cook in the back was not wearing a face mask. Again, the manager was advised that all employees must be wearing a face mask. Total, at that time, 8 patrons were observed drinking without ordering food, as admitted by the manager. 4 patrons were observed standing on the deck while consuming alcoholic beverages, and 1 of the employees was not wearing a mask. They were in violation of 202.52, 202.43, 202.38, and 202.6. Later that evening, at about 8:30 p.m., the investigators drove past Hibiscus, and the investigators noticed that the outside bar had in excess of what appeared to be 100 people standing while consuming and not following social distancing protocols. The investigators immediately contacted the Freeport Police Department. When the Freeport Police Department arrived, they observed patrons. According to Sergeant China, this morning, the patrons were shoulder to shoulder by the crowded outside bar. Some were seated, but most of them were standing. They were not social distancing, and they were drinking beverages. The police counted 69 patrons on the outside bar, and at least 10 to 15 were just walking around with beverages and not wearing food. They were acting as a bar service. They were in violation of the executive orders 202.43, 202.38, 202.16, and the SLA guidelines. In addition to this, on July 5th, the Freeport PD responded to a call for a highly intoxicated patient who needed to be transported to the hospital. And while at the premises, Sergeant Trotter observed approximately 120 patrons in different locations throughout the town. Many of them were observed walking around without face masks, and others were standing and drinking. They were charged with violations 202.16, 202.43, 202.38, and the SLA violations. As I said earlier, based on my conversation with Deputy Chief Michael Smith, since June 20th, there have been 7 calls for service, which have resulted in 3 arrests on 3 separate incidents. These calls for service involve, on August 5th, the complaints for the EO violations. On August 2nd, there were 2 incidents involving altercations. On July 5th, there was a call for a distress where the intoxicated male was transported to the hospital, and they were charged with EO violations. On July 2nd, there was a call for disturbance. July 26th, there was a domestic matter that escalated into an altercation. 6:20, a patron was arrested, resisted the arrest, was thrown in the back of the, was placed in, back of a police car, and the patron proceeded to try to kick out the windows. When the police officer went to open the door, the patron proceeded to spit in the police officer's face. So based on the police records we have reviewed, based on my conversations with the Deputy Chief Michael Smith, Sergeant Joseph China, and Investigator Charles Savali, Council's office commenced the revocation proceedings against the licensee, which is annexed to your documents as Exhibit 1, and the licensee cannot claim to be unaware of the guidance and regulations on the EO. In addition to the prior violation that the licensee received back in June, and also had pled no contest to, he cannot say that they weren't aware of the EOs and or the guidance and regulations. These executive orders were designed to prevent the spread of a deadly virus, and the licensee poses an imminent risk to the public. And by virtue of Section 401, subsection 3 of SAPR, where the agency finds that public health, safety, or welfare requires emergency action, summary suspension of an order may be ordered. Accordingly, we respectfully request the members summarily suspend this license. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Fan, do you have any questions?
No, I have no questions. Thank you.
Commissioner Ford, do you have any questions?
I have no questions, Tom. Thank you.
All right, Chairman Bradley, what about you?
Mr. Amarato, can we have, or can you contact the police department and ask them or find out why they haven't been calling us when this has been going on? After this.
I certainly will, Chairman. In fact, this morning when I was in contact with the Deputy Chief is when he sent over the referrals pertaining to the calls for service. And it was interesting to note that although they don't talk about EO violations, one could speculate that there were EO violations going on based on the altercations and disturbances amongst the patrons.
All right, thank you.
All right, then I'll call for your votes then. Commissioner Fan?
Oh, actually, I actually do have one question, Mike. Was this a food board issued license?
Was this board license? Was that what you asked me? Did this go before the full board for licensing?
Yes. Yes. Was this matter food board for licensing?
Not to my knowledge, but I will just
Okay.
want to add thing to the license is so new that all of the village licenses, the business license, the food and drink license, the public assembly license, is still under the prior licensee, which was E.J. Elliott's. So we are going to be investigating that as well to make certain that the certificate of authority is in the licensee's name as it should be now.
Okay, got it. Okay.
All right, then I'll call for your votes. Commissioner Fan?
Yes, sorry. This business has been in business for perhaps 8 weeks and basically have created such a rowdy situation that it's already a drain of police resource on the Freeport Police Department. And this is before we even start talking about the executive order violations that council mentioned about outdoors, about lack of social distancing in the outdoor service, lack of food with alcohol service, and lots of patients standing around, lack of use of face masks by patrons and employees. And manager also start creating fake receipts and commit fraud when the investigator is asking about alcohol and food service. And so this location really, really problematic. It's too bad that they started operating 8 weeks ago and really started out in the wrong foot. And this place is definitely a drain on police resource. The licensee is blatantly disregarding ABC laws and executive orders issued by the governor to prevent the spread of COVID-19. And due to immediate threat to public health, safety, and welfare, I vote to summarily suspend this license.
All right, then, Commissioner Ford, your vote?
On several occasions, just that we know of, in their short existence, they violated several executive orders regarding inside service, regarding social distancing and face coverings, allowing patrons to consume outside while not being seated, failed to exercise adequate supervision, didn't have their license posted. A focal point for police attention and only in business for 8 weeks, all during this period of time that the COVID executive orders have been in place. That's got to be, that's a lot of work. So I vote to summarily suspend this license.
All right, then, Chairman Bradley.
I vote to summarily suspend as well. The licensee's already got one EO violation. He also then was visited by investigators from the task force indicating that he was violating again and lied to them, so clearly was aware he was violating and created false documents to try to cover it up. And then less than 2 hours later, they come back and it looks like a full-blown party on the deck. It's obvious that this licensee has no intention or interest in following these executive orders, and therefore he is a clear risk to the public health, safety, and welfare, so I vote to summarily suspend.
All right, thank you. Chairman, I have nothing else on the calendar. Do you have anything else?
No, thank you very much, everyone.
All right, with that, then, this meeting is concluded. Thank you.
Thank you.